Hello, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural episode of Q the Podcast. I'm here with my Italian friend, Ben.
Hello there.
He sounds British.
Excuse the accent, please.
Yeah, because he is.
And
He's a British immigrant living in Italy. You goon.
Yeah.
And I am Steven.
Jeez,
and,
thanks for disclosing my location. Now
yeah.
I'm gonna get doxxed
Yeah.
by Brexit.
You're gonna get doxxed by Brexit. Yeah. Today we're just gonna be talking about animation versus live action. Kind of our thoughts on both, what their pros and their cons, and I don't know, perhaps why we prefer one over the other. Is that fair to say, Ben? That we both might be a little bit
It
biased
would be
here?
fair. Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I think it's fair. Yeah, so Ben is actually, he does animation. He's worked on a few projects for a mutual friend of ours. So you might have a little more, you might be a little bit more justified to speak on the matter of animation more so than I can, because I cannot animate. So you kind of have a glimpse at what it's
I
all
guess
about.
I've looked into the process a lot more. I've read up on the subject.
You've stared
and
into
of course, analyze it more.
the soul of the beast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And came back to tell the tale.
and was one of the few who can hold his sanity and get his story out.
I don't know about holding on to my sanity. Maybe the reverse.
Is anybody
I think
sane? Is anybody really sane, or are we all just lunatics?
I
Our
would
own
say
ways.
no one is, but then
But if no
Yeah.
one is sane, then doesn't insanity kind of become sane? Oh, geez, this is the wrong topic. Look, look at us go, babbling on about nonsense that doesn't matter. Yeah. So
when
I
do
guess
we want to set off?
yeah, this is the first episode. I decided that I wanted to start a podcast. We've done a podcast together in the past with some friends of ours who will probably make appearances in the future. But I don't even I the more I look back on it, the more I hate it, and the more that I think that if I ever showed it to anyone, it would get me in a lot of trouble.
Get you
'cause
fired.
It's not
Yeah.
an appropriate podcast.
It's
Which
not
now I'm
workspace
tainting this
appropriate.
one by even mentioning it, but oh well.
Or home place appropriate, really.
Yeah, it's not a. It's just it was just bad. But yeah, I was like, hey, I miss doing the podcast. I miss talking with my friends all the time. And so I was like, I want to start a new one. One that's not confined to an absurd premise that requires hours to
Hours of
understand.
prep work, yeah.
Yeah, so this is just basically going to be me and Ben talking about random topics, for funsies, for the sake of friendship
And magic.
and magic. It is fair to say, and maybe not important to say, but Ben and I have never met in person. We met via a mutual friend of ours because
Yeah.
Ben decided to get born and raised in Italy for whatever
In
reason.
a third world country.
Some third world country like Italy. So our relationship has been entirely online, and it has been beautiful.
It's been exhilarating.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, back on topic, I guess. Yeah. So animation versus live action. Probably you might have picked up from the fact that Ben does animating, and I stated that we're both biased. Both of us, I think, probably prefer animation-based content a little bit more than live
Yes.
action.
I guess I just appreciate the skill set that goes into it. Not that that there aren't similar skill sets that need to be applied to live action. It's just the amount of effort it takes just to put an image on the screen in animation. Whereas in live action, you don't so much have to focus on putting the image on the screen, but making the image a good one.
Yeah. Well, you got to worry about both with animation. And animation, it is totally... You can't... I really feel like you can't argue this. It is much more difficult to produce anything that's cartoon or
yeah.
animation based than it is.
You need the time, the effort, the money, the slaves,
Yeah.
the software.
It's like the way I like to think about it is that, like, with live action stuff, right? You got a camera and you got a guy who's on camera, and so, like, if you're the director, you know what you want. You know, you can literally just walk over to the left if you want your angle to be more to the left, or it's just like you just have to move the camera to get a better angle. But with animation, I feel like it requires a lot of more thoughtfulness to be put into the project, because you have to animate the angle that you're using. Like, you have to know which angle you want to use so far in advance, and then you have to articulate that angle to the animation director, and you have to, there's just so much that you have to make sure that your characters are accurately drawn in each frame. Oh my god.
Speaking from personal experience on projects I've worked on, just the simple fact of correcting a prop usage or something, or even just the fact that if a shot doesn't quite work, having to then redo all of it. Like with animation, you make what you need, or at least as far as I've observed, not a lot of animation hits the cutting room floor. You just don't finish it. Like you leave it at the storyboard stage if you don't want to use that cut. You very rarely is it our parts trimmed off, I think, as opposed to live action, where maybe you'll film 3-4 times the amount of footage you need, and you can use that B-roll footage of maybe extra camera angles or different wordings of lines, and you can insert different versions of the film to create a more well-timed piece.
Yeah.
Whereas with animation, I've had the experience of even just not planning ahead enough and ending up with the wrong character holding the wrong prop in the wrong scene, and being faced with the prospect of having to redo the scene in order to fix that issue.
That sounds so much fun.
It is the best.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the biggest difference between live action and animation, other than one is drawn / modeled / sort of photograph, like, and the other is just filmed, is the amount of planning you have to put in, like the amount of pre-production that goes into it. Like, I think most movies are a sizable amount pre-production, a smaller amount production, and a larger amount post-production. Animation, I believe, is the great majority, or if not that, the most important part is the pre-production.
Yeah, it seems to me, and the probably one of the most complicated things that I can think of is that when you are creating animation-based products, like, it's not just one guy who's sitting in a room animating everything. Like, you have, 100 different people all working on different scenes, or the same scene, or different, moments in the animation. And the tricky part is that all of these people have to be on the same page. They all have to be going off of the same character reference photos. They all have to know how this character moves, and like what their mouth movement should look like, and it's like you have to have a group of people who all know exactly what it needs to look like, so that when they are doing it, it doesn't look like one guy was doing it, and then you can very clearly say, oh, he went home from the night, and night guy came in to finish the scene. So I think that's something that I didn't even really think about until I watched the Little Witch Academia behind the scenes, and like the animation thing. They did like a half an hour thing. But I think one of the to get into more of why I prefer animation to live action.
Might I interject for a second?
Sure, yeah.
It is worth stating that neither of us have any professional training in these fields. We are enthusiasts.
Yeah.
Let's say. And everything we say can be, should be subject to scrutiny.
Yeah.
Can and should be.
Taken with a grain of salt from two guys who have never really done anything professional. I mean, I've helped George film his stuff.
We've done things on amateur levels.
Yeah. But neither of us has ever done anything like high production. So that's, Ben maybe more than me. High production in the sense that it was very time consuming for you. The little.
Yeah. I've spent 7 months working on a 4-minute animated short.
Yeah, I'm sure it would have gone faster, but Ben is still in school,
Yeah,
so
school.
he's got school going on and all these other things to mess with his time. But yeah, no, that is fair to say. Neither of us has any real hard experience.
While I may be able to speak actually with quite a lot of what's the word, let's say, like I can speak quite surely of, I guess, freelancing, even though I haven't done a professional freelancing. I don't believe you could call what I've done that. I still have had the freelance experience at an amateur level, so I can speak quite surely of that. It's working with a team, I believe, greatly changes the experience. Even just the idea of handing off pieces of your baby to other people.
Yeah.
To complete. I did ask for a little bit of help on my project, and just the thought of letting someone else handle the lip syncing, I found it quite troublesome.
Yeah.
Quite worrisome.
Yeah, I can imagine that would be. Well, if they goof it up, then you kind of gotta go back.
I mean, I guess the good side is they're doing nothing but save you time.
Yeah.
And if they goof it up, then you just do it yourself, and
right.
They just didn't save you that time, but you haven't lost anything really.
Yeah, like with lip syncing in particular, but there are other things where, if someone colors it wrong, you got to go back and.
Which, fun fact, I didn't actually end up handing off any of the lip sync to anyone in the end. I did it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, I mean, I think we both have reasons why we prefer one to the other. We very clearly believe that one is more difficult to produce than the other, and that is sometimes to its detriment because, oh gosh, the amount of anime and cartoons that I've seen that are just terrible.
And the amount of in mainstream media, just the amount of safe bets that come out.
Yeah.
Because it's unthinkable, I think, to put out. I mean, Disney tried with the Black Cauldron and Treasure Planet.
Yeah.
Kind of. Mm-hmm. And they just don't. I don't know whether Treasure Planet was more of a accident in.
Well, it's one of my favorite.
Timing the release.
If not my favorite Disney production of all time. I think it's one
but
of their best.
Black Cauldron tried to be a bit more experimental, I would think, and it's didn't do well.
Yeah.
It's kind of seen as the black sheep of Disney's animation, at least in the early days.
Yeah. Well, even with that, like, not to say that there haven't been plenty of terrible like live action movies or TV shows put out, because there have been. Yeah, that's a whole different podcast to get into. But I feel like with
maybe the ease of production of live action is what allows so many B movies.
Yeah.
To exist, and Z movies.
That could definitely be. But then it raises the question, because I've seen, like I said, so many animes, and they're not easy to produce, just done terrible. Like, you could just look at it and it looks awful, and there's no color, and the lip syncing is off, or the movements and actions are weird, and it's like, I feel like once you can goof up anime or cartoons. I feel like in a couple different realms where you can mess it up in the animation, where like the animation looks terrible. You could mess it up in finding good voice actors, so the voices are terrible. You could mess it up in so many, like the coloring can be
many
off
more facets. Just the simple fact that in live action you can at least rely on physics to work.
That's like your one anchor
and for people's bodies to move in an anatomically correct way.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Like, you have to worry about how natural motions things are. I believe animation is curating real life to make it act similarly to where you want.
Yeah.
Which is hard.
And
whereas animation, you have to create the world, and that adds infinitely more
complications.
Complications. Just many more areas in which you can cock it up.
But that is one of my points here as to why I think one of animation's it can be one of its greatest strengths or greatest weaknesses is that they have an open world to design. Like if you want your if you want your vision, if you want your your creation to take place in some crazy science fiction planet or something like that, like you can animate it in that way. Like when it comes to live action, if you want something to take place on some wild sci-fi planet, most of the times it's just going to be filmed on like some remote location with CGI thrown in to make it look different. But like I feel like you can just do so much with animation. Not to say that you can't have an open world in live action, but I feel like when you have to use Earth as an anchor in live action, you really kind of limit your content. Whereas with animation, like if you want your like Space Dandy or Cowboy Bebop, if you want these things to take place in outer space and then have them land on some crazy world or like the afterlife or something like that, like you can do it so long as you can draw it,
And what's interesting is actually the extent to which you can even fumble with the animation if you have a good screenplay.
Yeah.
Despite the differences of these two mediums, they are still both driven by the narrative more than anything.
Right.
In most cases.
Yeah.
You can animate a one-dimensional character as well as you want, but if he's one-dimensional, he's one-dimensional.
Right.
No one's gonna care.
Yeah, you could give him the coolest design in the world, which I feel like is probably one of my biggest problems with anime and cartoons.
Yes.
Is just that they try and make their characters look so cool, and like you end up with these dull 1D characters that are just boring to watch. But then they've got that like classic anime hair and like this ridiculous outfit on, and you can tell that like all the guys in the production room are like, oh yeah, this guy's a real badass. But then like he starts talking and it's just Ray Romano, like, oh hey, I'm just some guy. Which is another thing, voice acting in animation. I feel like. Also, first of all,
I think that's another example of greatest strengths and biggest weaknesses.
Yeah, I was just going to say,
I don't know
everything in
about
animation is probably a double-edged sword, because you can either get it right or totally bumble it.
Yeah, that's the thing. You can... Because the plus side to hiring voice actors is, for one thing, you could just hire an interpreter and have him do all the voices, if you really want to, if that's what you're going to go for.
Yeah.
If that's how small your budget is. And you don't have to worry about actors looking like characters. You do have to worry about actors' voices fitting designs, but even that, I believe, is more malleable.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Than with a real actor. Like, if you've got... Like, there's countless examples, especially in anime, of female voice actresses playing male characters, which allows you to completely sidestep the issue of child actors being generally terrible. Is just have a female actress
who's got the higher
play
voice
in a male voice.
Yeah.
And there you go. It's a 14-year-old boy.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about trying to find the perfect face for your movie. Like I feel like in a lot of live action, getting characters is based off of, well, how do I want this character to look, and then having to find an actor in real life who looks like that. But then you also have to worry
find
about
someone who looks, sounds, and acts the way you want them to.
Exactly.
And all three of those have to coincide.
Yeah. And if they don't, then you're goofed.
And you have to wait for them to come to you. Like, you need the people to be there and to want to do it.
They have to be able to want to do
them.
what you're doing. Whereas in animation, you can just find some guy who's got the voice you're looking for. You don't even have to worry about the face. And as long as he's got the voice, and the voice can match the character design, then you've got what
depending
you need.
on how good they are, I'm pretty sure you can achieve the same effect of an in-studio recording with just a Skype call. And similar setups. You really need to be careful with the audio quality being the same. Right. Actually, I think that's one of the bigger problems with dubbing in animation, at least at the start. I read that basically the way the earlier studios were set up were that they were in small towns in America, and they'd just be set up with they just hire from whatever local theatre group there'd be.
Yeah.
And you kind of had to do that because the price of flying in actors is inconceivable for a small company that's just starting out. And you need people in the same place to record in the same room to have similar audio quality. So maybe I'm wrong about that, about the Skype call thing, now that I think about it. But you can, if you're going to fudge it, you can fudge it. Like, there's a greater gap for... There's more of a margin for illusion in animation.
Yeah.
I think.
That's it. No, I'm just kidding. You know what? And I do feel like with animation, one of my biggest points as to why I kind of prefer animation to live action, and I should say that, this is specific more to the, fictitious world building type of productions where it's all fantasy or sci-fi or anything like that. So one of my biggest points is that there's like a certain suspension of disbelief that I have with different things. So like with Marvel movies and superhero movies, like it drives me insane because like I watch it and I just can't get into it. Which is like outrageous because everyone loves them, but like I watch them and it's just like none of this stuff actually happens in real life though. And then they're like, yeah, well, it's like a fake universe where it does happen. And I'm like, I know, but it's filmed like in New York City. Like if you got rid of the superhero aspect, it would just be our planet. And it's like I find it really hard for me to buy. I don't know why. It's quite
interesting.
Yeah, because it's like I watch it and I'm just like, it's tethered so much to the real world when you get these like, oh look, it's Tony Stark running around in his Iron Man suit, accidentally destroying half of New York, and my mind's just like, but like that technology doesn't exist, and like what about all the damages and the cost of repair and everything like that. And
I agree with the idea of damages and cost of repair and all that.
And that's one of the major points I think a lot of people can point out. But
and just collateral damage. Like you think they blow up a skyscraper? Did they really evacuate?
Yeah. Did they really get everyone out?
How is it that easy to see characters as heroes when you see the?
Yeah, Stan Lee. Did it really? Did you really get them all out, Stan Lee?
But then again, I do believe that live action, like the Marvel movies, have kind of approached that aspect, and there are
and
comics
it's not even...
like the Civil War comic, like the Civil War series, which I don't believe is that good. I don't think is that good of a comic series. The event comics, they're kind of getting old and boring, but there is something is they do approach the aspect of superheroes being dangerous.
Yeah,
like these sort of aspects do get acknowledged, but it's getting more into narratives and not so much differences between live action and animation.
Yeah, and I might just be bickering because like one of my favorite all-time movies is The Blues Brothers, which is like ridiculous. Like it's these two guys who are doing, like, you watch the church scene and they're flipping, like doing crazy flips like 10 feet 15 feet in the air, and you got this nun who just like floats backwards, and then like Nazis, and like the car literally just flies. You know what I mean? Like they have the Nazi car, I'm pretty sure, just starts like flying at one point and then just like crashes down or something. And it's like, I don't know why. I just don't have a problem with that because I feel like they're being more honest about it. Like, hey, we understand that this is ridiculous. That's kind of the point, is that it's ridiculous. But then with like Marvel movies and all these other like superhero fantasy movies, it's kind of like, no, it's not ridiculous. We want this to have more of a serious tone behind it where it can be believable and still be anchored in the real world. And I just can't like get behind that for some reason. Whereas with like animation, I feel like the fact that it's animated even if it already takes place on Earth, at least I'm not looking at a real human being doing something. You know what I mean? Like, I can already kind of hang my suspension of disbelief from a noose in the corner of my room because I'm looking at this and I say, well, this isn't real. This is an animation. You know what I mean? And it's much easier for me just to get into it and commit to it than it is for me to do the same thing with live action. I don't know. Is that a real problem, do you think? Or
I believe that is more...
Am I just nitpicky?
It's hard to say, because I believe it's a legitimate complaint that some people might share, but I do believe a lot of people are more able to suspend their disbelief with supernatural stories. That a big part of that is tone, and it would be interesting to see how this could get approached more in animated features in the West, because the only real example we have of serious stories, any magnitude of serious stories anyway, is from the East. From the West, what do we have? We have maybe Anomalisa, Fantastic Mr. Fox, all the Wes Anderson movies, like Island of Dogs.
Still haven't seen that, but I really want to.
I saw it twice in theaters. I love it. It was great. It's probably out on DVD now. I need to get that.
Yeah, it definitely is. I'll try and get a copy.
We should do that. We should watch that.
Yeah, we'll do a group watching.
That is an interesting thing. That is actually a big thing in animation, is fitting the style to the tone. You cannot have... I mean, I guess you could, but I don't know how well you're going to drive your points home making a serious drama in the style of Adventure Time or Steven Universe.
Yeah.
And I don't know how well your happy, fun time, a kooky adventure is going to come across in the gritty, realistic style of something like Anomalisa, I guess, would be an example. Like, that's another thing is, which medium of animation do you use to tell your story? Stop motion can work really well for things like horror because of the jittery movement that stop motion naturally has.
It looks really unnatural because it's supposed to be creepy. You got buttons for eyes.
I mean, I've heard of people being scared of like the Yeti in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer because of the kind of jittery way the stop motion makes it move.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't really think about that aspect of it, but I definitely had a note on here talking about how in some cases like it's much more easier to set your tone in live action than it is in animation, but if you do it right in animation, I feel like the payoff can be a lot greater. Which is another thing that I kind of have on here that tethers to like action sequences, because I feel like it's gotta be easier to just film two guys doing a staged fight for live action than it is to animate a fight scene. Like, I can't even imagine animating a fight scene, much less doing it well.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like there's so much that goes, like with oh my, okay, so like when an animated fight sequence is done well,
it blows your mind. I feel like
there's very few things that can beat it.
It would be hard to argue that any live action fight sequence can really meet the same levels of fluidity that an animated one can, just because of the way you can even just distort space and motion.
You're not confined to human limitations.
Especially, like, you're not even confined to the amount of visual information. Okay, let's say you need to convey the idea of a bottle flying across the screen, like it's been thrown from screen left to screen right, off camera. You likely only need about... Like, if you want to just get the idea of something crossing the screen, you just need 3 frames in order to... I mean, I believe Richard Williams said old Disney rule is something needs about 14 frames to be processed going from one end of the screen to the other. That's still half a second. And that is... with animation, for some reason, I'm not aware why, but you require a lot less visual information in order to understand what's happening. Something can happen in a very brief moments, in a very brief space of time, and you will comprehend it better than you would the same action, the same amount of time in live action. Let's say you have a quarter of a second of just something flying across the screen, you will likely understand what the object is better in animation than you would in live action for some reason. It's maybe due to the simplicity of the representation, which, no one's animating picture quality, like photo quality.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely...
and the lack of motion blur as well, I think. I had another thing. What was it? Yes, that's actually a thing, I believe. Is it Satoshi Kon, the director? Who was the Japanese director who made, oh god.
Let me stop you right there because I have no clue. I'll look it up though.
But there's this Japanese movie. It's about like dream sequence, like dreams, and it's basically a series of dreams. And I'm trying to remember the name. It's a very famous animated movie, but basically there's this one. There are some directors who choose to work in animation specifically because the kind of work they try. The kind of stuff they try to make needs to rely on the amount of visual information animation can give in the short amount of time you give it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree. You can convey a lot more in animation than you can in live action, and you can animate things to be way more cool than they can be in real life. Like, to this day, one of my favorite
Death Note potato chips
probably moments. Yeah, probably one of my favorite is that what were you saying? Is that the name of the...
No, like, for example, eating a potato chip. Visually interesting. I know that it is a bit of a meme at this point, but the potato chip scene in Death Note
yeah.
An incredible example of how you can make eating chips...
A potato chip so dramatic.
Dramatically. I would love to see that done in live action. I believe it was cut from the Netflix movie.
It would look ridiculous. It would look...
I would love to see how closely someone could emulate that feeling in live action. It would be very interesting.
Good, if I'm being honest.
To what extent that scene relies on animation tricks.
You can get so much more across in animation, and that's even just with the way that you direct something in animation. Like I was gonna say, in Space Dandy, if none of you guys have heard of Space Dandy, you should check it out because it's awesome. But anyways, so they have this like moment in the very first episode where Space Dandy and Meow are like on this alien planet, and then like all these monsters start showing up and start like fighting each other and stuff. And you have this like incredible like sequence for a first episode of like Space Dandy and Meow trying to like escape the mayhem. And so you've got like this there's like this one scene in particular where they're like running, I think, around across this rock that's moving. And it's like the way that they animate it is so funky. His legs stretch out so far and the screen is like moving past him at such a rapid rate. But it's such it looks so awesome, like watching this sequence. Like you could never, ever do something as like abstract in movement or pacing like that in live action. It's something that's special to animation, and it's still one of my like favorite moments to watch. Like that little. Do you know what I'm talking about? The sequence where he's.
I'm not aware.
He gets like okay.
I did find the movie, by the way. It's Paprika, and I was right. The director is Satoshi Kon.
Nice.
Paprika. Perfect Blue fame.
Add that to my list as well. Have you seen Space Dandy?
I have not, but it's been at the top of my list for ages.
All right. Well, we're no longer talking about animation or live action. This is now me harassing Ben. Watch it. Literally the second. Don't even watch past the first episode if you don't have time. But like, just watch the first episode tonight, please, because you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. It's funny for those of you out there who are interested. It's really funny. It's really well done. It's a great show altogether. It's like 2 seasons long, and it's an amazing experience. But yeah, you'll see he like gets buried in stone, and then the stone, they have this thing where like something lands and the stone moves like a wave of water, which sounds crazy, and you could never do this in live action, and that's the point. So like the stone moves in like a wave of water, and once like the wave comes to where he is, it like pushes him out of the stone that he was buried in, and it just looks so funny. It's such a weird thing to watch. And like I've had people tell me like, oh, that's not how stone works, and I'm like, yeah, okay, but like, I don't know. Maybe I'm like the reverse side of the spectrum. Maybe some people have a harder time suspending their disbelief with animation, but I have a harder time doing it with live action. I don't know.
Maybe some people are just wet blankets about the whole thing.
Yeah. I'm a wet blanket. I'm a soggy blanket. I don't know what I'm talking about. I've gone insane.
I want to bring something else up.
Yeah.
Horror. There's a big distinction. There's a big distinction between the way live action approaches horror and animation approaches horror, and this is mainly considering anime because I don't know of much horror other than like kids horror, like Coraline and Monster House happening in the West. I think it's mostly the East that does horror. It's mostly the East that does any intriguing
anime
non-kiddie stuff with animation, unfortunately. Live action animation seems way more focused on scaring the viewer, whereas like making you fear for yourself, whereas animation horror wants you to fear for the characters. They're mostly character dramas with death thrown in. They get you attached to the characters and then they kill the characters, because the ability to scare someone beyond conceptually with an animated character, it's a lot harder, I believe, to get anyone spooked with an animated character than it is with live action. I think to
get them good and spooked.
To keep your horror rooted in reality with live action, it becomes way more effective at scaring people, whereas anime needs to make you fear for the characters.
Yeah, and that probably goes into another point that I had of animation being easier to get like abstract with, or do things that you don't really see in live action with, which kind of goes off of my last point too. But like I've seen so much more, and I don't mean like abstract in the sense of like crazy scenes like you get from like Akira, where some guy like explodes into a giant flesh monster or something like that. I kind of just mean like they can experiment more with what they have than you can in live action. And like one of my biggest points here was that like I feel like you can get so much more colorful in animation than you can in real life.
I think my biggest draw to animation rather than live action is I just love cool pictures, and I love cool pictures that move even more, and I respect the people that make it so much, because I kind of know what goes into it. I know what my limitations are, so to know that these other people, like they had a team of people who all broke through the limitations I currently have, doing such excellent work, drawing a beautiful piece of art every 24th of a second.
Yeah.
It's
color is incredible. One of my biggest turn-ons in anime, to put it in a weird way. But like with Little Witch Academia, that's a Netflix original on Netflix. You can watch it if you want. That show is so colorful, and it's so pretty to look at, and it's like when they're using their magic, dude. The magic in that show looks phenomenal.
Like Little Witch Academia has not been groundbreaking with the choice of colors to represent magic. But when doing the same thing in live action, it looks corny as hell.
Yeah.
Whereas the way
Yeah, because
Little
you
Witch
have to- you
Academia
have to
creates a
commit.
contrast between the less saturated colors of its world and the insanely saturated, almost neon colors of the magic, and the way
Yeah.
it moves and flows and explodes. It looks magical. I've never felt what magic. I've never understood what is magical about magic as well as I have while watching Little Witch Academia.
Yeah, exactly. Like you watch that show, look at Harry Potter. You can definitely say for this, I think in the earlier movies, where they like the magic they used where it would like come out of the wand. You know, you'd get like a little blue like ray or something.
They keep
like
it
that,
brief
and it would, like, hit
or
something and-
simple.
Yeah, and because they have to tether it to still look realistic. You know what I mean? Like they want it to look like it is something that could happen on Earth.
I mean-
or to humans, because if you have like, you can't have like, you know, Daniel Radcliffe waving this wand around and then have like this clearly cartoon or anime like explosion come out of it, because it wouldn't look like that was actually happening in the live action movie. Whereas in animation, once you get through the fact that everything is already cartoon or animated or whatever,
It fits
and,
in
and then you can
perfectly.
you can commit to having that crazy, like, it almost looks like the magic in that show is like it's in 0G. Like it looks like like when you see like a water blob in space and it just kind of like floats around and like kind of like moves but doesn't disconnect from itself entirely. That's what I picture when I see Little Witch Academia's magic, is because it looks so watery and yet so
A globulous.
like, yeah, like such a glob of color that like
Viscous.
explodes into. It's awesome.
I
and
love
I
it.
love it.
It's. I just love Little Witch Academia. It's the best. It's the
new
best
podcast.
piece of media.
This is Little Witch Academia, the podcast. It's not Q. We changed it. This is official. This is canon. So deal with it.
So we've talked about the cast of time. We've talked about skill involved. We've talked about the variables. We've talked about the voice actors, the visual information, the planning, flexibility with B-roll. Just the idea that you can. What we haven't talked about is the deliberacy. Like anything you look at in an animation has to be put there.
Yeah.
Like, yes,
Yeah,
this is
thank you.
kind
I
of
didn't
true.
even think about that
This
for
is
this.
also true of live action. Like, if you walk in, no one just walks into a room and films. You walk in, you arrange the furniture, you place the prop set. But that
Right.
is gathering and
You
placing.
want certain
You're
things. You can see
arranging
that
the
in
scene.
Clockwork Orange.
Whereas-
Stanley Kubrick, where they have like symbolism out the wazoo. Like
Yeah.
in every scene, you're gonna see, like when they're in the room and they've got like the statues of like the woman's breast, like pouring milk into cups. You know, so it's like that looks. You look at it and you're like, what is that? But then like you think about the symbolism and you're like, okay, these are literally like the people doing this ultra violence are just a bunch of kids, you know, feeding off of mommy's breast. Like that's the symbolism there. And so like things can be placed there, but you can also have things in live action where it's just like, you know, some guy mentions something that you know that the director never planned to have meaning, and he's like, oh yeah, this has really deep meaning, and then the director's kind of like, yeah, I did that on purpose, you know. But
Yeah.
like in animation, everything is on purpose. Like if
Everything
you
is on
get good anime, there's not something that it.
I mean,
shouldn't
even a
be
bad
there.
anime, the worst anime, everything in there is drawn by
destruction.
someone. Is put there by someone. No, like a bad movie, they might just walk into
Maybe
a
a
room
brain
and film.
dead someone, but still a someone.
Like if you've seen a bad student, if you see our mutual friends' works, any sort of amateur level project, you may just sit and record in your room and with a bad green screen and
Yeah.
like
I'll link him in the description.
there can be
unfortunately,
incidental
unless I'm
elements to a
committing
movie,
suicide.
and some of that can be in good. Some of them can aid the story, but it's kind of daunting to imagine how everything, including the physics and the weight of the world, has to be placed by someone in animation.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not to say that it's always done well.
To be fair, the kind of adherence to real life are kind of what can sometimes make live action so impressive, with things like the Spielberg Zoom, I believe it's called. Yeah. Where you manage to, through perfect alteration of focus and zoom with a camera, you can obtain the effect of zooming in on a character's face while zooming out of the background behind him.
Yeah.
With a a camera and a guy turning knobs at the right speed.
Turning knobs. The guy in the control room. Yeah, no, this is not to say this whole thing has not been me and Ben shitting on live action.
No.
Some of my favorite things ever, Tarantino's movies I love, Kubrick's movies I absolutely love. Like all of these are live action movies that are some of my favorite things of all time. I just think that animation, when done right, because it can be done wrong, and when it is done wrong,
I think that's the big asterisk on everything, is that I love animation. I don't love many animated works.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of most animation pieces because of how hard it is to do, because of how much time and money has to go into it, and because of actually how often animators are less artists than they are. Like how animation is much less an art than it is a skill, like a craft. You like, if you ever hear animators talking about their work, it's more akin to mechanics discussing the way they would fix machines rather than discussing high concepts of art. There's mechanisms, like even just the act of lip syncing. There's a very mechanical element to it. You place the shape of the syllable before about a 12th of a second before the syllable is spoken. There's all these sort of tricks that you just apply to it. And it's kind of a big shame when I see a brilliant animator going off to make a solo project, because I almost guaranteed that solo project isn't necessarily going to be a great piece of work. It might be a great showcase of animation talent, but the story may never meet my expectations.
Yeah. It might be lacking in some departments.
They'll usually be lacking in some other interesting department, which is why I wish mainstream entertainment would mainstream studios would get more risky with the products. I mean, because we do have anime for getting animated series, good animated projects made. We have anime. Japan's doing a fine job, but anime is rarely a good showcase of animation. Whereas I'm only really seeing in projects like Wes Anderson's movies, for example. I'm not saying those are the only ones, just those are the ones that come to me from the top of my head.
An example.
Like Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox. That's what I love. That's where I see that animation's being used to its the best of its potential, with the way he put, like, Wes Anderson will play. I mean, he does this in live action as well. I haven't seen any of his live action movies, but I am aware that he puts a lot of the tricks he puts into his animated features into his live action features. The way you can play with the timing of actions and all that, he does do that. He uses the medium to its fullest potential, and it looks great as well. And the story is great.
And it's not even the full package. The stories are great too.
We need more full packages in animation.
Characters. Yeah.
I think that's the biggest problem. Because rarely will I get we don't get a Studio Trigger production every year which has great designs and great motion, powerful poses that looks good with decent anatomy, which that's a thing I didn't go into. Biggest pet peeve with a lot of cheap animation is bad anatomy. I believe good anatomy will take any piece of art farther than almost any other element. Is just, okay, maybe that's not quite true, but like just having a believable bone structure to your characters renders it so much more appealing. And studios like Studio Trigger are the main ones that come to mind of who does that right. Studio Trigger, Gainax as well. those guys. Yeah, basically, we need more of these. We need the big shots to actually make good stories.
We need more 10 out of 10s. So everyone go to Twitter and tweet at all these studios and tell them to start making more stuff. This is our thing now. We're a propaganda train. We've switched the style of this podcast 5 times, and we're doing it a 6th. So everyone, this is a propaganda train. Go harass your local animation studios.
Local animation studios. Also, tell me where they are, because I need to find a local animation studio. Where are they hiding? Where are the animators? Where are the other ones?
They got the answers.
I think I'm the only one. I've never seen another animator.
Yeah, so I feel like I've already said this, but I'll just say it again because why not? I can probably name more live-action TV shows and movies that I like than I can animation projects.
And there's a lot of good stuff that we have yet to see, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
With both of us.
Yeah.
I haven't seen many animation movies.
Projects
a lot
that
of those
I've seen that I like.
and Perfect Blue, Wind Rises.
Yeah.
That's just Satoshi Kon's work, because I have it in front of me because I Googled him.
Yeah, the animation projects that I have seen that I do like, I probably tend to enjoy more than I do the live action ones. So while I see fewer, I tend to enjoy them more. And I think that is just because the entire point, really, I think that we've been getting at here is that animation is so much more complicated to pull off well. And you're so... I think
to pull off
the biggest...
I think animation is way more complicated to just pull off competently.
Yeah,
maybe they both take the same amount of talent and technical mastery to make good, but animation just takes that much more effort to just put into existence regardless of quality.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't... Just because someone put time into it doesn't mean it's going to be good. And that's the case with a lot of
And that's the biggest failing. That's the most
sad...
That's the saddest story in art today, I think, is just how hard animation is to make and how rarely a good animation will also happen to be a good story.
Yeah.
It's depressing, really.
That's our biggest challenge that faces us today. Is trying to find animation is not only
I think we're just going to have to resort to watching like Stanley Kubrick movies with Sakugaburo open on another tab.
Drive them home. Both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could get behind that. We'll have to pin our eyeballs open to make sure that we don't miss a second of it.
Yeah.
Because he mentioned Stanley Kubrick, so I made a Stanley Kubrick reference. Did you guys get it? Clockwork Orange. Did you guys get it? I wanted to get it in close for that because I wanted to make sure that they got it. Did you guys? Did you guys get that?
I hope I have a fun fact, which hopefully should be a fun fact that you're not aware of and not too apparent from the audio. I've been eating this whole time.
I have not been aware of that, but that is a fun fact. What are you eating? Something fun, hopefully.
Well, seeing as my current state trapped in this third world country, it's pasta.
Yeah. You heard it here first, folks. An Italian eating real Italian pasta. That's all they eat there, but that's not what I want. Maybe we'll talk about all the Italian diet and how you can achieve that wife beater physique on the next podcast. I don't really have any other points really other than live action. The tropes in live action aren't really as irritating to me as they are in anime.
That's more really a case of just the way anime is made. It's a very cannibalistic mindset.
Yeah. But that's not a big point.
We can go into that next episode with Japan versus the West.
They don't bother me as much. Yeah, good point. But yeah.
That was a joke,
did you have any other points, Ben?
Stay tuned.
No, I agree with you entirely. I agree with your joking self. But yeah, I'm out of ideas. I'm out of points.
I think just give a quick
I feel like I got out what I needed to get out.
Yeah, I think. Okay, here's something I didn't quite go into.
Oh yeah.
The process of streamlining scripts for the sake of animation. That's something even I encountered in making a 4-minute animation. I didn't do the pre-planning well enough with our mutual friend George. What we should have done...
I will link in the description,
really,
but don't expect anything good because it's not.
We should have really gone over the script again and mutilated it to fit it to animation, because he just wrote the script as a script, and it was like, how long? Like 10 pages. It was divided up into segments, and we only worked on the first sixth for the first episode. And yeah, this whole thing, we really should have just gone through and adapted it to something easier, like cut scenes, edited scenes, so it would be just be easier to animate. And that's the kind of process like that. I believe all animated projects go through that. There seems to be a hard, fast rule in Disney of just not having any animation screenplay be longer than 90 minutes, and anything above, did I say minutes? 90 pages, which probably translates to about 90 minutes. And also like anything above 80 pages is pushing it, and anything above 90 pages you got to cut it down, supposedly. But I believe that hard and fast that rule probably stems more from the old concept that animation made for kids should be made to no longer than the child's bladder size can take for one sitting.
Yeah, that might be
and also I guess for allowing more showings in the day, and like allowing more theater showings before the evening hours when the adult movies would be playing. You'd be able to play the kids' movies more times because they're shorter, therefore allowing for more cash monies to come in through the door.
I'm trying to find the oh, there it is. Well, I was just thinking when you said 90 minutes, I mean, clearly this wasn't made for little kids, but Spirited Away is, 125 minutes. So it's up there.
Indeed.
Yeah. So that's
like I said, I think that's more of a dated project. More of a dated.
It's not.
Concept.
Yeah, it is 2001. It's not.
No, I mean
also a good movie.
Just the idea that
Studio Ghibli.
screenplays should be limited to that length, because in the end, The Incredibles is 2 hours long. Have you ever heard anyone complain that The Incredibles is too long? I don't think so.
Absolutely not, because that movie is awesome.
Okay,
Both of them.
Here's an interesting fact. There seems to be like a 5-minute cap on how long people are going to put up with abstract animation, whereas there seems to be no cap on the amount of time people are going to put up with animations that walk and talk, as Richard Williams calls them. Basically, one of the first animations, non-Disney animations, to hit big was The Yellow Submarine by the Beatles, which is this long, kind of abstract animation of not the best fluidity, not the best animation quality. And apparently, people's reaction to that kind of killed everyone's opinion of non-Disney animation for a good long while. It took a while for independent animation studios to come back from that. Because The Yellow Submarine, as this first big hitter of non-Disney animation, was kind of boring. And a big part of that is just because people aren't willing to put up with abstract stuff for that long when it comes to animation.
Yeah, and I think that's fair to say, especially with like Neon Genesis Evangelion, like episode 25 and 26. It's like 2 episodes of just crazy. Like when I first watched it, I was ready to just turn it off because I was like, I can't watch this right now. Like it's too much. My brain's taking in too much.
I think that is aided by the voiceover.
So it is.
I also think it's harder for your brain to just get into shapes moving for any length of time without some hook, which would be the story, without something to root its attention on.
Yeah. But still great. One of my favorite things of all time, so I just proved you wrong, Ben.
Oh, no.
I'm not the average Joe when it comes to being able to put up with animation. I've had my fair share of having to stick it through terrible animations.
Oh, we all have
countless hours.
See our previous podcast, I guess.
No, don't.
No, don't.
Yeah, don't.
But just look at the titles and you'll know.
Which is gonna basically tell you all you need to know about it. But yeah, animation, it's cool, it's awesome. It's better than live action sometimes, and sometimes it is an atrocity that should be put in front of a firing squad.
I think if we were to ignore limits on manpower and time power and money power,
so
we would be able to, like, I believe if those were ignorable, animation could just surpass live action to some extent. To some extent, I believe that. I believe there'll always be a place that live action has to fill, boots that live action has to fill. And I would actually never want to see either prevail over the other, which is kind of unfortunate how animation does get shafted a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But like, I love both. I want both to survive, but I do believe that there's just, in a lot of story types, animation, if we were to take away limits on the quality, it could be like incredible.
Awesome. Yeah. Incredibles 2 was also a good movie. I'm just kidding. A 4, why not?
Let's see whether they got that. Incredibles 3.
I hope
we're gonna do like the Top Gear. Let's do Top Gear. End on a bombshell.
I was kind of indifferent to Incredibles 2 in the first place, just because I was so satisfied with the first movie that I was like, I don't think we need a second one. But then they were making it, so I was like, if you're gonna make it, you better make it good. And I thought they did a pretty good job with it. But okay. I don't want there to be a third one. I want them to end on a happy note.
Let's end on the bombshell that the internet is really stupid, and there's articles questioning whether Incredibles 3 will also take 14 years to make.
That's the end. The internet sucks. And
good night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to the show.
14. Yeah, as always, and by as always, I mean as for the first time, because this is the first episode. Thanks for tuning in, if you did.
Cue the ending.
Yeah, cue the ending. Feel free to leave us comments in the comment section for future topics you want us to talk about. If we hate them, we just won't do them, and if we like them, then we'll do them. Yeah, so I guess I don't have an ending segment planned, but
no one ever does.
Cue the ending. Cue the ending.
Cue the ending.